Okay, we're in the middle of Kufyud Gimel, Hachid Gimel. Okay, the din was about different ways of preparing food that are not the traditional way, and that there's no Isser Bishalakim on brining or pickling or smoking. And Mirza Hashem will do this time about food that's smoked and about steam, and then another time afterwards to wrap up some other things that are sort of related. Okay, we talked mainly last time about if you prepare food by brining it or by pickling it. And the Rajba had rice that. How did we know that if you smoke a food, it doesn't need Bishul Yisroel? So everyone brings that Yerushalmi says, it's Yerushalmi in Nidarim, that says that if you make food through Ishun, it's not Bishul. That's what everyone quotes the Yerushalmi as saying. Okay? Now the truth is that if you look in the Yerushalmi, that's not exactly what the Yerushalmi says. Okay? The Yerushalmi says, asks about 4 different things whether Ishun counts as Bishul for those things. Okay? The 4 things are Bishul Akum, cooking on Shabbos, Basar B'chalav, and whether something could be kavua for meiser. Okay, that's a din in meiser that if you cook it, it could become kavua for meiser. Not relevant to us. Okay, it's 4 cases. The Yerushalmi asks, if you prepared something through smoking, would that be considered? Would it be, let's say, be basar b'chalav, or would it be cooking on Shabbos?
Between cold and hot smoking.
We're going to get to that in a second. And the Yerushalmi asks those 4 questions and doesn't answer any of them. The Yerushalmi just leaves them as questions. All 4 of them leaves them as the subject. Just leaves it as a question. That's it. Just leaves it as a question. Okay. So, the way we have Yerushalmi, it's left as a suffix. Okay. All the Rishonim who bring it as the Yerushalmi says that there's no bishlachim through smoke. Okay. So if we would have by ourselves would have looked at this, we would have said is they all had some kind of different gears in Yerushalmi. There's lots of gears in Yerushalmi, and somehow they must have had a reading in Yerushalmi that said that it was mutter, that it's not bishlachim, because they all say it. And the Yerushalmi says that it's not a problem.
Okay.
That's not what. No. So but that's I would have just said okay, they must have a different girsa because they all say that. That's what Yerushalmi says. Okay? But the Chazanish in Maestros says that what they mean is like this: since the Yerushalmi is mesupik, and I'm putting a few words in here, and this is a shayla of the drabanan, therefore we're meko. Okay, so when they say the Yerushalmi says it's mutter, they don't mean the Yerushalmi really says it's mutter. They mean is the Yerushalmi is not sure. If the Yerushalmi is not sure, we could be makel about that thing. Okay, that's how he reads it. Okay, now
this is a drabanan thing.
Bishul Akum is only Issa Drabanan. Okay, so the Chacham made it because they were afraid of Chasnas. So it's only Issa Drabanan. So we say if it's a Safik Drabanan, we're going to be makel about. That's what all the Rishonim mean. Okay, now a nafkamina between these ways of reading the Yerushalmi is, if you remember last time we talked about a machlokes, Rashi and the Rajba had to understand whether the Gemara says that food made through pickling through salting, through brining, is bishlachim or not. According to the Rashi, it's a machlokes in the Gemara, and according to the Rajba, the Gemara knows that it's pasha that it's not bishlachim. Okay, so whether you could bring a raya from this Yerushalmi depends on whether the Yerushalmi says it or not. If the Yerushalmi is mesupik about it, so the Yerushalmi is mesupik about smoking, and would be like sort of like Rashi, that the Bavli has a machlokes whether salting food can make a bishlachim also. So the Bavli Yerushalmi would be saying the same kind of things. If the Yerushalmi is saying if the vadai smoking is not bishlachim, if the Yerushalmi has an answer, a vadai answer to that question, then it would be a question of Rashi. Then it would be more like the Rashi. But the question of Rashi, why would it be machlokes in the Bavli, or would the machlokes in the Bavli tell us not to pass like the Yerushalmi? Okay. Now, what's a little hard to understand is that if you look in Pri Chodesh in Hilchos Basar B'chalav, he says if Basar B'chalav were machmir that smoking is considered cooking. And he says, the reason why we're machmir by Basar B'chalav is not because Safek D'Raisa L'Chumra, not because that's a shayla of a D'Raisa. The reason why we're machmir by Basar B'chalav is because there's a Yerushalmi in Shabbos, that Yerushalmi in Shabbos says that in Shabbos it's considered cooking, to smoke a food. And since the Yerushalmi in Shabbos is being pushed the shayla from the Yerushalmi in Nidarim, and therefore, since the Yerushalmi in Shabbos is machmir, we're also machmir. That's why we're machmir for Basar B'chalav. So the Pri Chodesh is saying is that as if all 4 of these shaylas are totally one on the other. Remember, the Yerushalmi in Shabbos was pushed the shayla for Shabbos, and he's saying since we pushed the shayla for Shabbos, therefore we now know that for Basar B'chalav we should also be machmir. Okay, we would assume, which is exactly what the crazy place he says. He says is that it has nothing to do with each other. They're four completely different shilas. The shilah for Shabbos is it a rate? Is it like the Av Malacha? Is the shilah for Basa B'chol? Is it Derech Bishul Makav? Each shilah is its own independent question. We wouldn't connect them to each other. We understand sort of, doesn't exactly, but sort of what the Chazon says that it's a question of Shabbos, D'oraisa, D'rabbanan. Each one has its own question. We could judge them separately, not like the Pri Chodesh is saying that if Yerushalmi was Posher one of them, we could be Posher all of them. Like even the Pri Chodesh, he doesn't talk about Bishul Akum, but Pri Chodesh doesn't say that Bishul Akum is Asur. If you ma'ashin it, it's a version in here that it's not. So I mean, it's not like we don't understand exactly what the Pri Chodesh is saying. That they're all as if connected to each other. Yes. Sir.
Isn't that we have the underlying cause for all of them?
We're going to talk about that in a second. But the Pri Chodesh seems to be saying that it's the same question for all four of them.
Right.
Okay, but
what makes you think there's not?
we'll talk about why not. Why it might not be in a second. But think about it. Like, tell me, David, what's the din? The din is by Bishul Akum. We said it's mutter.
Okay,
So it's a kasha. Okay, so I'm saying the Crazy place says no, it's not really the same question. And we'll see later. Most people do not assume that it's the same. We're not going to Bishul Akum even directly. What did you say?
Bishul Akum could be mutter misafik. The Pri Chodesh was talking about bringing the right to Basa B'chol from Shabbos.
He says since Yerushalmi was poshet the Shaila in Shabbos, so it was poshet for all of them. Not as a chum. He says it's not that it's because of self as a chum. It's because we were poshet the Shaila. Really, if you poshet the Shaila, why weren't we poshet for Bishul Akum also? That's okay. Okay, now the Torah, as you could imagine, brings our din just like the Shulchan Aruch does. He brings salting and brining, and then he brings the din of smoking. Okay, and the Rishonim all follow that same pattern. I'm not sure why I'm picking on the Torah. Okay, but he said it as sort of like this. Even though with Derech Klal we would say Malich K'Reseach, the Kavish K'Mavushal, here we don't say that. That's how we said it. Now, there's a chiddush to the way you say this, to what I just said, which is, and this is what we're heading towards next, which is, we would think that things that are cooked through smoking are not exactly the same as by kavush or by maliach. When you cook something through ishun, even though it's not really cooking with a fire, but fire is involved in the cooking. You can't make smoke if you didn't have fire originally. Right? You have to have had a fire at some point. So it's not the heat of the fire that's cooking, but everybody says the reason why maliach and kavush are not usher, the way they set it up is, last time is, it's not through a fire. It's only bishul they are. Well, smoking is sort of idea. I mean, smoking is not through the heat of a fire, but it's something connected to a fire. So it's a chiddush to say that even so it's not considered to be idea or it does have something to do with it or. It's not completely unrelated to it or. Whatever, it's something related to it. And even more unusual is the Rajba. When the Rajba brings this in, he says, Kavush and Maliach are not, and he brings all his rayas that they're not. And then a little bit later he says, and Ishun, of course it's not. Didn't I tell you already that anything that's not with the fire is mutter? Okay, so by him somehow it was pashut that Ishun has nothing to do with the fire, even though we see a little bit to do with the fire. I mean, you can't make Ishun without some kind of a fire. Okay, but somehow he thinks that maybe we'll see more about that in a second. That's what we're getting to right now. That's what we're getting to now.
I don't know how do you smoke? How does smoking work in general?
We're about to get there. Okay,
The old Pesach or the new Pesach?
Anyway, I don't know.
You can speak about the way the Gemara talks.
Okay, we'll talk in a second. Okay, we're heading to. Okay, so Ishun, we're just looking in a more theoretical sense. Okay, Ishun, Mu'ushan does not cause Bishlat. Okay, now as you know, there's a lot of discussion in what we'll call the contemporary poskim about whether if you cook something with steam, with live steam, whether that makes it Bishlat. When I say live steam, I mean is when you take a food and you blow hot steam at it and you cook it through that. I'm not talking about, we'll talk in a second about that, I'm not talking about cooking indirectly through steam, I mean like in a jacketed kettle. I'm talking about you cooked it directly, so you hang the food up in a machine, our corned beef, hang up corned beef in the thing, you blow steam at it, and it cooks the food. Okay? So there's a shaila about whether that is or is not bishlat. So before we get to the, so to speak, main shaila, two of the like minor reasons why people might say that it's mutter, why each cooking through steam is not bishlat, is because, first of all, steam is only a tolda eish. It's not the eish itself. And maybe Bishul Akum only applies to the eish itself, but not to a tolda of the eish. And second is, cooking through steam wasn't a way of cooking in the times of Chazal. somehow they know that. It wasn't used in that time. So only the things that were made in those days are usher. New kinds of methods of bishul are not included in the Isra. Okay, so it doesn't include this new kind of bishul. Okay, so on these two things, let's deal with those first before we get to the main question. On those two things, the Dr. Tshuva talks a lot about this, because there's actually earlier in the Simon, in Sifkat Tezayin, who talks about this, and he doesn't like the first shot. And you have to realize, if the reason why steam is mutter is because it's only told us or and not the or itself, then it wouldn't only be mutter by live steam, it would be mutter even by jacketed kettles also, because it's still not the fire itself. It would mean is anything that doesn't have an actual standing flame standing underneath it would be mutter.
I said, Mark, you can say water is also told sage.
If you cook something in water,
Yeah.
why are you saying that?
Told sage.
You're saying you mean you put a potato into a pot of water, so then
So then what? Because
okay.
The water is
So you think the fire is heating the water and the water is heating the potato. So I guess they're going to have to say, no, in that case, the fire is heating the potato. And the water is just like an in-between, You think so so you mean it, so the steam is the same thing. What's the difference if the steam, okay, that's a fair way of arguing on it. But somehow if you could be machal, I don't know what the answer is, but even if you could somehow be machal, that the steam is different than that, what would be the difference between live steam and indirect steam? What's the difference? Both of them are not the Eish. If somehow steam is not the Eish itself, then it would be okay. Basically, there would be no Bishul factories.
unless you take the piece of meat and put it on the open fire.
It's in very rare cases would there be such a thing.
Even in your own house.
In your own house, why?
Because you have it in the pan.
No, if you cook it in water, it is Bishul. So he asked the question, why? I don't know. How would these people explain that? Somehow it is. Then of course it is that it's Bishul. Okay, and the other thing is, and this we're going to come back to later, the second reason was that it's an issue that didn't exist in the times of Chazal. So Rav Wassenaar says, the Gemara doesn't say that you're not allowed to do this and this and this. The Gemara just says that you're not, anything cooked by God. It didn't give specific examples that would say, oh, only those are included. For example, the Mishnah says you're not allowed food cooked by a guy. Right? Somehow the Gemara knows that food baked by a guy is also. It didn't just say only Bishul. And it doesn't say any place that fried food is Bishul Akum. It doesn't say any place in Gemara that fried food is Bishul Akum, but we all understand that fried food is also Bishul Akum. We don't say, oh, no, I'm sorry, it didn't say that in the Gemara. But it's understood that, this is what Rav says, it's understood that any way of preparing the food through heat, wait a second, is Bishul Akum. Okay, so the fact that we have a newer method shouldn't stop us. Yes.
Sure, but just like we know that there's more coolers when it comes to bread, pasakum, so maybe, because it's the stipend, whatever the reason, so maybe there'd be more coolers when it comes to that too. There's different levels of bishul. Maybe fried would be different than on an open fire. I'm just saying, or if you have a headset with water.
So
where does Rav Ozen know that?
So
He's making a general rule.
when for pasta, Gemara talks about it, and they're trying to tell us that it's different, we understand that. But without that kind of, someone saying that to us, we just assume any way of cooking food is also. No, these people are trying to say is, since it's not one of the ways that the Gemara talked about of cooking food that they had, it's not included in the Gemara. No, the Gemara didn't say to specifically. It said, any way of cooking food. Cooking is cooking. What's the difference?
It's for applies to it. Chasnas is chasnas.
Right. Okay. Now, but the most famous reason.
I thought that's a live issue in the mutter.
So Ishin, because it's not cooking from heat. It's not a cooking. It's like pickling the food. It's not cooking. So that the Rishon told us. It's only through cooking methods, not cooking. But cooking through steam, cooking like this, it's all cooking. It's like saying frying. Why is frying? It doesn't have to be, say, every single way of cooking. If you cook through heat, that's cooking. Okay, now, the most famous reason for saying why cooking through live steam should not be Bishul Akum is because many places can say that it's the same as Isha. Okay, well, we cook something through live steam is the exact same thing as Isha. Just like Isha is mutter, so to cooking with live steam is mutter. Okay? What's the comparison? Is both of them are not the fire itself. There's some
generated through it.
Something coming out of the fire is heating something that's creating something else, smoke or steam, and it's hitting the food and it's making it edible. Okay. So now, in order to understand whether it should or should not be compared, sort of what Moshe is saying, in order to understand whether it is or is not compared, we have to have a little better understanding for why is Ishun mutter, and then that'll give us a better understanding whether steam is or is not the same thing. Okay? Okay, so there's three sort of reasons I'm going to take. Okay? One is to say only things that are only cooking that happens through heat makes the food usher. Anything that makes the food edible without heat is not usher. Okay, that would fit with what the Rajma that I told you a minute ago. The Rajma says, how do I know that Ishun is not Bishul Akum? He said, I just told you that Kavush and Maliach are not also, so Ishun is also not mutter. Meaning, it's the same kind of thing. It doesn't have heat, and therefore it's mutter. Okay, now that would mean that the only time that Ishun would be mutter would only be if you cook something through cold smoking. Okay, what's cold smoking? Cold smoking is you put something into a chamber, into it you have something smoldering, giving off vapors, smoky vapors are coming out of the food. It's not hot. If you walk into the room, it's 80 degrees. It's not hot at all. But somehow that smoke has an effect of making the food edible. Okay, it keeps it from spoiling, and it makes the food more edible. Okay? I don't know the mechanics of it, how that works.
Go to the gym, put a piece of meat in it.
Okay, I don't know how that works, but so the smoke coming out of the coals or whatever is giving off the wood chips that are sitting, something that's burning, that's smoldering, but it's not hot in the room, and somehow that makes the food more edible. I don't know the physics of it, why that works. Okay, so but if you're saying that the reason why it's mutter is because it's something that Ishun is done without heat, then you would assume that means it's only through cold smoking. Okay, but if you did hot smoking, there are ways to prepare food that the smoke is not cold, the smoke is hot. If you could prepare the food through hot smoking, then it would be. If you would prepare the food through hot smoking, then it would be also because that's using heat to cook the food. Okay, and because you're using not just it's not
heat to make the smoke to make the food. It's a little more indirect.
Because
You're still using the smoke. I don't know the difference.
okay, you're still using smoke, but tell me what you're saying.
But the heat is there to produce the smoke.
It's no. You're using it's heat.
the other way around.
It's not, smoke is hot, so the way it affects the food is different than just cold smoke.
So how did the smoke get hot?
Well, the smoke always gets hot through some kind of heat. You can't produce smoke if it's cold. I mean, it's not just that the smoke is. We need a hotter fire to make more smoke. It's that the hot smoke somehow has a different effect on the food than the cold smoke does.
Which we can say that.
But it would mean it's not so negated us to understand for that case. But for sure, if you cook with steam, it shouldn't be mutter. How can you say that if the whole heter of Ishun is because it doesn't use heat? If that's what the heter is, which would be the simple understanding of the Rishonim, only things that are through heat, like cooking and baking, are also the things that are without heat, like kavush and maliach and ishun. If things that are without heat make it mutter, then how could steam be mutter? Steam couldn't possibly be mutter because the steam is all heat. It's not at all. It's not cold by any chance.
So let's say cooking an egg on a black piece of cloth.
Yeah.
That's total source. So what would that be?
That's a question of the Paiskim. Whether it told us or I'm not.
Spanish.
The smoke is also the same type of thing.
Okay. You could talk about whether the hot smoke or is maybe you'll tell me even the hot smoke might be maybe is mutter. Wait a second, but steam is pure heat. There's nothing there. It's just pure heat. So if you're saying if the whole heter is because there's no heat, there's no fire, what would be the heter in this case?
Well, if we're saying that the hot smoke is okay,
yes.
Okay, so whatever reason the hot smoke is okay, just say the smoke is
okay.
steam.
I'm going to get to you in a second about another reason why hot smoke might be okay. But right now, hot smoke would probably not be okay. You'd say anything with heat is not going to be mutter. So then hot smoke should be usher, and for sure steam should be usher. Okay?
Why isn't hot smoke any? Why? Hot smoke shouldn't be any better than baking. There's heat there. Baking just means dry heat. You have heat here, and this chamber is hot. It's baking, so it's baking. How could it be better than baking?
So you're saying is that Ishun must mean cold smoking, because anything that's with hot smoking is essentially a kind of a baking.
That's right.
Okay, we'll get so for now you're happy. Because I just told you that people say that's hot smoking. Hot smoking is not. Okay, we'll get to you in a second.
Did they have cold smoking in the days of the month?
Okay, for sure, cold smoking. The question is whether they meant hot smoking also. For sure,
Did they have cold smoking?
Well, I should say. I'm assuming so. Yes. Okay. Now, there's a very strong raya that this is not correct. Okay. There's a strong raya that hot smoke is included in the heteros, and that is, back to Hilchos Bas B'chol. Remember, our Yerushalmi had four shilas. Okay. The Prisha in Hilchos Bas B'chol says he's talking about the Yerushalmi as it relates to Bas B'chol, and he wants to explain how it should be derech bishul, and gives a bunch of eitzes. And one of his explanations for the Yerushalmi is that the basar b'cholav, what you put the milk and the meat together, and the smoke heated them up, and now that they became hot, now the basar b'cholav got cooked together. So what is he talking about? He's not talking about cold smoke. You can cold smoke something for 500 years and it's not going to get hot. He's obviously talking about that you did it with a hot smoking. So in his mind, he doesn't even make like it's a chiddush. In his mind, the case of smoking in the Yerushalmi, Yerushalmi's suffix about smoking includes hot also. That's one of his possibilities of how to explain the dim of basar b'cholav. So if the Yerushalmi is talking about even by hot smoking by for basar b'cholav, then the Yerushalmi was talking about that for us also. I mean, it's all the same stuff. The Yerushalmi has 4 shilos in a row. So then, but for Bishul Akum, it also means by hot smoking, and that's brought as a strong raya that even hot smoking is also mutter. Okay? And therefore, if hot smoking is mutter, then steam also becomes mutter. Okay, and aside from people in the Daki Tshuva brings people who makel. There's a number of what we call them more contemporary poskim. Rabbaran was makel about it, or someone of this in Tulushkin about hot smoke, about steam, food cooked with direct steam. Rabbaran Cutler, I'm sorry, insulting over here. Rabbaran Cutler. From this in Tulushkin, Rabbi Yosef is making about it, and Lamaisa, Rabbi Schwartz accepts that, Rabbi Heinemann accepts that, and Rabbi Gnack thinks that's fine. And it's mutter, if you cook something with live steam, it's not Bishul Akum because it's Ishan. Okay? Based very much on the Prisha, and the understanding about it, if you cook something with live steam, it's not. What? I didn't get there yet. Hold on a second. We're getting there. I'm getting there. Okay, so these people all said that it's mutter because it's really Isha, even though, now, the argument is that maybe it's not Isha because that's only cold smoke. They have a right from the Prisha and other svaras that they think that Isha means even hot smoke. Okay, now.
For sure, steam jacket is mutter.
No, steam jacket is usher. Because they see the steam jacket as just as a heat source, and now it's cooking in a pot of water. That's what's going on. You put the potatoes and water into a kettle. They sort of ignore the steam jacket, and they say, we're just cooking up the pot of water. This is only for direct steam. We mamish blowing steam right out the food and cooking the food directly.
What's an example? Like squash?
Then it's better.
It's better. Because that thing is cooking in steam, it's like it's smoking the food. No one would say a jack in the kettle is smoking the food. It's not
Putting a puddle.
That's
So
not going
what?
to be the maskana, I imagine.
It's the maskana. If you're working here in the Sirshi, yes, that's the maskana. They cook in live steam.
What are you cooking anyway?
Shalom always asks, is it live steam? I was thinking that's worse.
No, it's better. If it's cooked in live steam. Well, no. Wait. Time out.
What's that? We got to you got to go through your company now.
No, time out. Yeah, time out. As far as Bishul Akum is concerned, it's better if it's in live steam. As far as Blia is from the steam system, it's worse if it's live steam. If you have Blia in the steam system, meaning when there's a company that we know about where they cook corned beef in live steam.
Mm-hmm.
If that live steam would be cooking something kosher, that would be worse. Because the treif water is having direct contact with it. So for Bishul Akum, it's better. For Blias, it's worse.
Right.
So I don't know what the context is.
You're not about corn beef, are you?
Well, that's okay.
You're not
Now,
about corn
second,
beef, are you?
he is. Yes, he is. It's one of our 2 companies that makes
Stay away
Bishul.
from red meats.
One of our 2 companies that makes Bishul Yisroel treif, Bishul Yisroel corned beef. In case you want.
Well, Kashrus also makes
Take it on one steak.
Just
If you
one,
have the
just
steak.
one.
That's right. There we go. Okay, now we have 3 items. I didn't know about the 3.
They're wrong, the Bishul is from.
The idea is.
It's not like he's a private.
The idea of the point, I'm sorry for distracting us, but the idea of those companies is that in case you don't want to keep kosher, but you want your kid to marry a Jew, then you feed them this food. They eat straight, but they won't marry her. They won't be in the chasna. So that's what this food is for, in case anybody wants it. Okay, now, so the second, another hesper is Rafalk, Rafalk from England, says, pronounce how you like. Rafalk says he accepts this pshat that food cooked with hot smoke is also mutter. He thinks that it's mutter, but he says, why is it mutter? This is what David was saying. Why is it mutter? David is everybody here. Okay, why is it mutter? Why is food cooked with hot smoke mutter? Lamaisa, it's being cooked with fire. It's been cooked with heat. How can it be mutter? He says, so the hesper is like this. He says, when you cook something with hot smoke, you're really doing 2 different things at the same time. You're doing smoking, and you're doing heating. The smoking is something that should not cause Bishul Akum. The heating is something that should cause Bishul Akum. So it's a kula of Bishul Akum that it's a sort of like a zev zegarim. There are 2 things happening at the same time. There's heat and there's smoke, and those 2 things together, one would make it usher, one would not make it usher. Since they're going together, therefore the food is mutter. Okay? That's how we learn it.
Throw a little scotch.
I didn't get that.
Okay. The Ishun, smoking without heat, like cold smoking, is pure mutter. It's just, there's no fire, it's mutter. When you hot smoke, you're a mixture of smoke, which would be mutter, and heat, which would be usher.
Why is he also?
If you do things with fire, then it's usher.
Oh, I saw.
Because so therefore it's a mixture. The food has been cooked by a mixture of something that would make it mutter, something that would make it usher, and therefore that mixture, that wrapped together thing, is mutter. Okay? He says, but, he says, that's only true if you have both of them wrapped together. He says, what happens if you would do just the heat without the smoke, like in steam,
You'd be fine.
just the heat without the smoke? There's no properties of smoke that are making the food cooked. It's pure heat that's making the food edible. It's pure heat blowing at it. He says, then it would not be mutter. So he's sort of like a compromise, which is to say, he be masking that hot smoking is mutter. When it says ishun, like the preacher says, ishun means it's mutter. Yes. But he says, but he wouldn't say that with Indian to say that steam should be mutter.
No, because there's no such thing as cold steam. Cold steam can't do a thing.
Well, cold steam is meaningless. It wouldn't cook the food.
So we're doing it.
Right.
Smoke does something, cold steam doesn't.
That's correct. So the smoking be'etzim has some kind of property that makes it.
So cold smoke actually makes it like take a raw piece of meat and cook it.
Yeah, like a piece of lox. It just makes it just
Cook it might be the wrong word.
No, it's edible. It's edible. Absolutely. The word cooked is not the right word. It makes it edible.
Is the word curd?
It doesn't spoil, and it's edible. It becomes
Well, it's like salting does, you know?
right. Somehow it makes the food edible without cooking it.
We could send you a class.
You don't. If you eat a piece of raw fish, most people in this room.
See, raw fish is
No,
better than raw
no,
meat.
Doesn't taste good when you after you smoke it or after you salt it, then it becomes edible. You can get it. And meat is the same thing. You dry up meat. Yes. Okay. Okay. Lastly is Rav Vosner says that that he holds that when we say that things that are cooked from ishun and maliach and those kind of things are mutter, that's because those are not normal ways of cooking food. Sorry, they're not normal ways of either they're not cooking or they're not normal. They're not typical. But if you have a way that's a way of cooking food and it's a typical way of making the food, then that method is also. We're not going to talk about really what he says now. Really, that's for next time. We'll talk about what is really the real shayla, a bigger shayla, a different shayla he's talking about. But if that's true, the reason why ishun is mutter, ishun is not bishalakim, is because it's not a normal, typical way of cooking. Then of course, if you, and this is what he says, if you cook something with live steam, that is usher, because it's a very much normal cooking process that's going on. It's not a strange cooking process, a smoking kind of process. It's a plain old cooking. The food comes out cooked, and therefore he says that steam would be usher. Okay.
Well, isn't pickling something?
It's normal. It's typical, but it's not cooking. He says, but if you do a cooking and it's typical, then it's also okay. You're going to miss the milchus yitzum. Okay. I'm about to finish. Aside from the people we mentioned, it's worth mentioning that there's a tshuva from Chaim Ozer about whether steam is bishalakim or not. It's not a tshuva that he prepared for publication. It was printed after he died, and it sounds like he's machmir about it. It's very hard to read what he's trying to say. It sounds like he's being machmir about it. Rabbi Yashiv is for sure machmir about it. He has a tshuva. There are those who say over from it. He says that that's asur. As David said before, and Dain Weiss says that it's a tziruf, that if you have something cooked in live steam, but tziruf other coolers, what they are is not important, but tziruf other
Company. Every company.
Okay. So but his tziruf is that.
Sorry.
And the OU's Belsky and Rabbi both accept that in a variation of it. Okay, they don't take that tziruf per se. They take a different tziruf. They like a different tziruf that goes with it. But they're willing to be mitzaref with other things. Okay, and I'll just end off for in case you didn't catch me before, that there's a number of hashgachas, including the CRC, who say that who are mako and say that if you cook it in live steam, that's considered like ishun, that's mutter. But as you've heard, there are others who are not so sure about that. Okay, who only take it partially or never and consider it to be steam something.
And who's that?